Hi, today let's look at subtracting mixed numbers. I have here a mixed number 5 1/4 and minus 2 3/4. So let's look at this subtraction problem on the number line and then we'll come back to this. So when we define subtraction of fractions, here's what we gave for the definition of subtraction of fractions. We said on the number line, let's look at a segment of length 5 1/4. So here I have a segment. This segment is of length 5 1/4. And we said subtracting 2 3/4 means looking at that segment and removing from that segment a small piece of length 2 3/4. So here I have, this segment is of length 2 3/4. So from this long segment of 5 1/4, if we remove this segment of 2 3/4 from one of its ends, we would be left with this piece. What is the length of that piece? The length of that piece is in fact equal to this expression. So from the picture we can see the length of this piece is also, look at these two pieces, it consists of these two pieces of each one length 1, so that's 2 units, plus it consists of these short pieces. Each short piece is of length 1/4. So 2 of those short pieces is together, when you concatenate it, it's of length 1/2 unit. So altogether this remaining piece is of length 2 1/2. So let's go back and see what steps we can write out, and also we'll keep this definition in mind of subtraction, which is take a segment of like this and from it remove a segment of like this, and whatever remaining piece you have, its length is in fact equal to this expression. Now let's write out the steps to obtain the answer of 2 1/2, and to write out the steps we'll use the ideas I discussed on the visual model. So 5 1/4, that's a mixed number, and that's simply a shorthand notation for 5 plus 1/4 minus 2 3/4 is really a shorthand notation for 2 plus 3/4. Okay. Visually, we explained subtraction really means taking a segment of length 5 1/4 and from that removing a segment of length 2 3/4, and then the remaining segment would have this length or this length. So the removing of a segment of 2 3/4, we can conduct that removing in 2 steps. So I have 5 plus 1/4. I first remove a segment of length 2 and then remove a segment of length 3/4, and it accomplishes the same job. So I'm informally justifying why we can go from this step to this step, and I'm using that idea of removing segments from one end. So now we can push that idea through and say this expression is the length of a certain segment on the number line. What is that segment? Well, we get that segment by as follows. First we look at a segment of length 5, concatenate or attach end to end another segment of length 1/4. So now we have a longer piece. Now we remove from one of its end a segment of length 2, shorter piece, and then continue shortening it by removing from one of its end another small segment of length 3/4. The final segment would have this guy's length. Now the final segment, we can also accomplish it in a slightly different manner. We start out with a segment of length 5, and here we said make it longer, attach to it or concatenate a segment of length 1/4. Instead, what I'm going to do is, to that segment of length 5, I'm going to take away a segment which is this whole number. So I'm grouping the whole number actions together. So now I started with a segment of length 5, shortened it. It's now removed a segment of length 2 from one of its end. Now I have the short segment. Now I'll do 1/4. That means attach segment of length 1/4. Then take off a segment of length 3/4. So informally I'm justifying these two are exactly the same because they are giving us the length of that same final segment that we're talking about. They represent the length of that same segment we have in mind. Now what do? 5 minus 2 is easy to carry out, 3. And we think to ourselves, I will simply subtract 1/4 minus 3/4. That's just subtracting 2 fractions. Except there's a problem here. When we discussed subtraction of problems, we talked about it in terms of lengths of segments and removing segments. So in other words, we said 1/4 minus 3/4 would mean look at a segment of length 1/4, and from that segment remove from one of its end a segment of length 3/4. Well, we can't do that because 1/4 is smaller than 3/4. So we rethink this problem and we look at this 3 and we say, how about if I look at that segment of length 3 as a segment of length 2 and a segment of length 1. So 3 I'm rewriting as 2 plus 1, and then we have 1/4 minus 3/4. Okay, I don't need those parentheses. And now what I do is, this is the length of a certain segment. What is it? Segment of length 2. And this 1 is a segment of length 1. That 1 I can trade it, I can rewrite it or trade it for fourths, and I can think of that segment of length 1 as really 4 copies of 1/4. And why do I do that? Because originally, so let's write this down and combine these two numbers and write 5/4 and take off a segment of length 4. Now here I can conduct my subtraction because now I in fact have a fraction that's greater than this fraction. So then I end up having 2 plus 5/4 minus 3/4 is 2/4. That's 2 and 2/4, or if you like to reduce to 2/4, it is 2 1/2, which is exactly what we had before. So the picture, I used the definition of subtraction, and on the picture we figured out the answer was 2 1/2, and I used that idea to come up with these steps. Once you understand the logic of it, here's how you can proceed quickly when you have to subtract a mixed number from another mixed number. You can rewrite the mixed number putting in the plus. Then you can say you're going to actually subtract the whole number parts, such as this 5 minus 2. So you group them together, the whole numbers, plus the proper fraction part of the first fraction minus the proper fraction of the second part. This whole number subtraction is easy to carry out. Now here you need to carry out the proper fraction subtraction. Before you do that, make sure this fraction is indeed bigger than this. If it's not, then you would need to do this kind of trading in. Whatever whole number you have, you write it as 1 plus something else. And that 1, you trade it in, depending on, here I had a 1/4, so I expressed it as 4/4. So I could combine this 1 and 1/4 together. So do that, and then combine it in 5/4, and then you will be able to do the subtraction, and then rewrite your answer as a mixed number. And in another video, I'll discuss a few more examples without going into the details of why, and simply doing the steps. Thank you.